Alexander at Knife Sharpening, and today we're going to talk Tormek. So a lot of new sharpeners out there, and even some old sharpeners out there, have Tormeks, and probably the largest complaint I hear from people is it's too slow. So if you got your Tormek, and the Tormek comes with the Tormek standard stone, which is the SG250, this stone right here, and this stone can be either 250 grit or 1000 grit depending on how you dress the stone with the stone dresser, which is this thing right here. By holding this against the stone, if you hold it in this way, it's the fine grit and it'll give you 1000 grit, and you hold it this way, it's 250. But unfortunately, the first issue many guys run into is they think it's taking them too long to sharpen a knife. And what's the result of that? Well, sadly, a lot of times they give up on their Tormek and they stop using it and maybe go to a different type of sharpening system or a different way of sharpening without necessarily looking for other options and ways to speed up the Tormek process. So how can you speed up the process if you're using a Tormek? Well, the first thing I would say, if you're willing to abandon it, would be to abandon the SG250. Now, is it a great stone? It is. It does a beautiful job of sharpening. It's great for tools. It's great for knives, but it is slow. And if you really want to see slow, the first time, if you're a new sharpener, the first time you get a nice hard Japanese knife in and you try and sharpen it on that particular stone, you'll really be cursing and saying, why is this taking so long? Why can't I raise a burr? So what are your options? Well, one thing, you could look around and see, do you have any other equipment that might speed things up? And then you can kind of finish on the Tormek, which would be, do you have a 1x30? Do you have a 2x42? So you could take a 1x30, and I would say probably I would recommend maybe a Kubatron belt. If it's a super dull knife, you could set your 1x30 for whatever particular angle that you like to sharpen at. Say, for me, I do a lot of knives at 17 degrees, so I keep mine pretty much at 17 degrees. I'll go over there, hit it on the 1x30 for a few passes till it has a nice burr raised, and then I could bring it over to the Tormek for a final sharpening on maybe the 1000 grit wheel. Now, will that be fast enough for you? For some guys it might be. In the very beginning, if you're not super busy, if you don't have tons of customers and a lot of knives to get through. But for some, you'll find that even though it'll speed up the process, you're still going to need something even faster. So what are your options then? Well, the one thing Tormek will not talk to you about, and if you go watch all the Tormek videos, you're not going to see anything about CBN wheels. In fact, they even, I love the Tormek guys, they have tons of great training, but they even kind of talk CBN down a little bit. And my opinion is it's just because they're not invested in CBN. They sell diamond wheels, and if you're not using the Tormek standard stone or the other similar stone to that's a little harder, that they have for some harder tools, then they're going to be pushing you into the diamond stones. And are the diamond stones great? They are. Are they faster? They are. They're faster, they're more aggressive, they grind quicker. Do they have some downfalls? They do. They have some positives and they have some negatives. So what are the positives? Well, one thing, and I have all three Tormek diamond stones. I have them right back here. I'm just grab one of them. So this is the 250 diamond wheel. This is the coarse wheel. So this is their coarsest wheel. And one nice thing is you can grind on the side on the Tormek diamond wheels. And they're great for tools. And they have 3 grits. They have a coarse, they have a medium, and they have what they call, I believe they call it an extra fine. Now, what's the downside of the Tormek wheel? Well, the downside is that you need this stuff right here. So this is Tormek anti-corrosion, and you have to run your Tormek diamond wheels in water because carbon attracts heat. So you need a coolant, which you need to buy this, which you only need, I think it's 10 milliliters, which isn't much. So it's one little mark here. You fill that up into your water trough, but that 10 milliliters only treats 250 milliliters of water, which is not a lot. It actually doesn't fill the whole tray up. You actually have to raise your water tray up if you're only using the 250 milliliters. And this stuff, I don't remember what the current price is, but if I remember correctly, I think it's around $17. It might be as high as $20. You know, so you got quite a few uses in here, and you can reuse it. They also tell you can filter it through a coffee filter, and you know you can use it for a while. But it is an added cost that you do have to take into consideration, and you're still grinding in water, which a lot of guys don't like dealing with the water. You have the water troughs, and you know that's a whole situation there. Now, I use my Tormek diamond stones mostly for super steel knives, and that's about the only time I pull them out. If I got a bunch of super steels, then I'll pull them out and I will use the Tormek diamonds usually on them, and then I'll usually grind the rest of the day since I set everything up with the diamonds. But other than that, that's when I pull them out. I'm trying to get as much use and years use out of them as I can. My favorite stone are what we're going to talk about next, which is CBN. And CBN stands for cubic boron nitride. And what's really cool about CBN wheels, which I have 4 of them. Over here I have a 200. On here is 1,000. I have a 400 grit one right here, and I have a 600 grit. What's great about CBN is CBN repels heat just naturally on its own. However, these amazing engineers and chemists and whoever got together to design this stuff, it's almost as hard as diamond, but it repels heat. So what does that mean? It means you don't have to use water. So you can not put your Tormek water trough on your machine, and you can grind dry. Now, does that cause some other considerations? Yes. The other question that always comes up is, what about the dust, Paul? Well, I mean, this is a knife shop. And I have everything in here creates dust. These 1x30s create so much dust that I have a downdraft table for. My 2x42 creates dust. I have a vacuum system connected up behind it. There isn't anything in my shop that doesn't create dust. So for me, the advantages of CBN, the advantages of being able to grind dry and not have to deal with water and spilling water. And for me, my shop is my garage. In the wintertime, it gets cold in here. I also don't want to deal with the water in the winter. In the summer, I really don't care so much. But in the winter, it's nice to not have to use water, especially in a garage that's only got a little bit of insulation. So I really like the CBN. So I can either wear a mask, I have a ventilation system, I can even put a vent like right up here close to where I'm grinding to draw the metal dust away. So there's ways to deal with it. The easiest one of all is just to use a good 3M mask while you're grinding, and that solves your dust situation. Now, do you need 4 CBN stones? You don't. In fact, when I started, the first one that I got was 1,000 grit. Now, as I'm 2 years later into running my knife shop, I wouldn't have started with 1,000 grit knowing what I know now, but at the time when I started, and a lot of people tend to do this, they tend to gravitate towards the highest grits. In fact, I had a guy just in the shop yesterday, he was talking to me about getting a Tormek, and the first thing he wanted to get was the Japanese waterstone, thinking that, oh, I'm gonna get that stone. And a lot of people think that's the best. Dude, I own the Japanese waterstone, and I can tell you right now, for me, it's practically useless. I'm not trying to bang on the Japanese. It does some very cool things. Yes, it can mirror a knife beautifully if you wanted to put a mirror finish on something. It's 4,000 grit, but once again, you want to talk about taking an extremely long time to do something. Don't buy the Tormek Japanese waterstone if you think that that's gonna, be a fast way to grind stuff. It is not, and it's expensive. It's a $400 stone, and honestly, I barely ever use mine. I have given a strong consideration to probably selling it. I probably will at some point just pack it up and sell it to somebody else, because for what I do, it's not very useful. I don't need the Japanese waterstone. I don't even care for mirrored finishes on knives, and it would not be even in my collection of stones if I knew today what I didn't know back at the time when I bought it. So if you could only buy one CBN wheel, which one would I recommend is a question that I get a lot. My recommendation would be if you only can get one, I would probably say get a 600 grit. If you're grinding knives, the 600 grit is aggressive enough that it's fairly quick on dull knives. You can work on a pretty dull knife with the 600 grit, but it will give you an absolutely beautifully sharp knife that you'll be very impressed with. Your customers will be very happy with that. And then, the other one, I would say you could even go as low as 400. And as time has gone on, I've seen the value of lower grit stones much more than I did the higher grit. And I always find it interesting because a lot of people, they think like, oh, I need to get that, I want that 1,000 grit or the 1,300 grit diamond or the Japanese waterstone. And you really are doing yourselves a kind of a disservice if the first one you get is that high. And like I said, my first was the 1,000 grit, and I was blown away with how much faster my 1,000 grit could grind over the Tormek standard stone. I thought this thing was the greatest thing ever, and for months I ground with just the 1,000 grit stone, and at the time my level of customers coming in and the amount of business I had, I was able to keep up with the work. But as I grew and got more and more customers and more work coming in, I quickly realized the 1,000's not cutting it. So my second purchase was the 600 grit stone, which I quickly fell in love with that stone and realized, wow, the 1,000's great. It's really nice to have, but I probably would have been better off if I had started with the 600 grit. And then as time has gone on, I have added lower and lower grits. Now I'm using a 200 grit wheel, which I love for getting a knife prepped and ready to go. And a nice combination is if you can have two wheels, you can do a 200 and a 1,000. You can do a 200 and a 600. So a lot of times nowadays I work with 2 wheels. And yes, I have 2 Tormek machines, but you don't need 2 Tormek machines. You can do it all with one. I worked with one for a long time until I made enough money and decided I wanted to add a second machine. Do you have to have a second machine? Absolutely not. In fact, there's some nice advantages to just working on one. And let me show you, I'm going to show you real quick here, one of the advantages of having just one but multiple stones is the way these T8s are designed, you can change a stone really quick. So I keep my extra stones over here on buckets with lids on them, and I found that's a great way to not have to be bending down to the floor to pick them up all the time. But let me just show you how quick I can change a stone out. So simply all I have to do is twist each one of these the opposite way. Washer fell off. And that's it. And the stone's changed. So you can work on one machine. You could start with a 200 grit, which will be very aggressive and really do a nice job of getting that knife prepped. And then you can simply just stop everything, undo, grab your 1,000 grit wheel or whatever grit wheel you're using, and change it out. And you can see if you're not using water, it doesn't take long at all. Now, I actually added a second machine just because I wanted to have 2, and I wanted to be able to, at times, use my diamond stones in the same way that I use my CBN. And I didn't want to... The one thing that is kind of time consuming with the diamond stones is trying to take the stone off and balance that water tray and not spill the water. So it was more for using the diamond wheels that I wanted a second machine than it had anything to do with the CBN wheels. But since I have them, I do have the luxury of using 2, so I will put a 200 on this one, I'll put 1,000 on this one, and I'll start on there, and then I'll just change machines. Now, what do I do so that I'm not making new adjustments? And this is one of the great things about having 2 T8s, which is why I would say, you know, sometimes guys are like, oh, well, maybe I'll just buy a Wen, or maybe I'll buy, you know, some other knockoff grinder and put a CBN wheel on that. The one downside to that is that with 2 machines, if I start over here, and why are you not tracking me? Sorry guys, let's see here. Track. There we go. If I start over here on this machine using the 200 grit wheel, and I'm done and I want to go to my 1,000, I simply take this off, come over to my other machine, lock it in, and start grinding again here. And I don't have to make any changes. It's the exact same machine. Everything fits the same. Everything lines up the same. These stones are exactly the same. Since they're CBN wheels, just like the diamond wheels also, they never change size. So I don't have to worry about, you know, the diameter of that wheel shrinking like you do with the stone wheels. So everything's the same, and it's really easy to go from one machine right back to the other. But if you can only afford one, you saw it only takes a matter of a couple seconds just to swap out the wheel and do the same thing, and never take the guide rod out, and you can just keep going at it. So that's my tips for how you can speed up the Tormek. So like I said, you could start with a 1x30 to just, you know, get that knife cleaned up and set a new bevel in there, then jump onto your Tormek. If you want to go the CBN route, you can. Now, one of the nice things, let me touch on this too, let's talk cost. one of the beauties of these CBN wheels, I get them from WoodTurners Wonders. Now, there are some other ones out there too, but I've been using these for quite some time. And this is what they call their Spartan wheel. And yes, it's plastic in the middle. As you can see, it doesn't have a side that you can't grind on the side like you can the diamond wheels. So these are really only great for things that you're going to be sharpening in a way that you're not flattening. Like if you were looking for something to do chisels on, this isn't going to be a great choice for that. You'd probably be better off with a diamond wheel. But the beauty of these wheels are, these are right around $200. So a Tormek diamond wheel, last time I looked, they were around $385. Almost $400. So you can get two of these practically for what you get one diamond wheel. So they're a great value. They last a really long time. They're easy to clean. I clean them with PB Blaster. I have a video showing how already done from a while back how to clean these. They're very easy to clean. The other question we get a lot is, can you run them in water? You can, but what Ken Rizza, who's the owner of WoodTurners Wonders, says, if you're gonna run it in water, you have to thoroughly dry it off when you're done. Now, I would say that for a lot of their stones too. Like one issue I had with my Japanese water stone, I sometimes store mine in buckets, and one time I noticed it started getting a little mold on it because it had moisture in there. So I was able to clean all that off, but you really want to make sure that if you are going to run your CBN wheel in water, and they also, the last time I checked, they don't recommend using the Tormek anti-corrosive on the CBN wheels. He just says, run it in water, dry it off thoroughly when you're done. I don't run mine in water ever. I did try it just to test it out. It works just fine, but I actually prefer the feel and grinding dry. The only thing that you will notice, like it's on the more fine wheels, it's very easy to see. When you're grinding on the heavier wheels, you will see some of the metal dust kind of building up on the knife sometimes. So sometimes I'll just clean that off, but it's really not a big deal, and you will probably very quickly come to love grinding on CBN would be what I would bet, because most of the people that I know that have gone to the CBN wheels absolutely love them. They realize, like, wow, these are great, they're fast, they're affordable. And I'll just finish with this. I like my CBN wheels so much that if they did wear out in a year's time, I would buy a new one every year. At $200, for the amount of sharpening I get out of them, I would replace them, literally, I would replace them every year. Now, do I need to? No, not at all. My oldest one here has been running almost 2 years now, and I think it's got many, many, many more years of use in it. So, they will last you a long time if you take care of them properly, and they will help solve the major issue and complaint that a lot of people complain about the Tormek. How do I speed up the process? So I hope you guys like that. That's the end of this video for today, and I will talk to you all later. Have a great day.